In this window into my classroom, I will show you why and how my students took control of their learning to become creators of content rather than just consumers. At Sturgis Charter School in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, we have about 24% of students with learning differences, about 12% are of lower socioeconomic status, and 15% are non-white. We are an IB for all school, International Baccalaureate, meaning that 100% of our students take all of their junior and senior year classes in some of the most rigorous high school classes offered in public schools, regardless of school background and learning differences. For the vast majority of our students, this means adjusting to increased rigor and higher expectations. At the beginning of the year, my students shared their hopes and fears with our classroom community that was just beginning to form. Two quotes that were repeated in similar ways by many students were, "I hope to maintain my interest in biology despite the difficulty of this class, and I fear never really understanding a topic." These student anecdotes led me to focus on motivation and the balance of control. Democratic science teaching pedagogy argues that shared authority will increase student learning outcomes and engagement. Additionally, the self-determination theory argues a similar point. When students perceive a greater sense of autonomy, they tend to have an increased motivation to learn. Both ideological frameworks argue that positive outcomes arise when students perceive a sense of control. Thus, I came to the question, how might we utilize student choice to create an artifact of their learning? I want to allow students to have a choice of topic, a choice of how they show me what they know, all while convincing me that they are meeting high expectations of the IB biology curriculum. In the most recent iteration of this project, my students would complete a unit of study by selecting one of about 30 IB learning objectives that highlight an aspect of the curriculum that they feel will demonstrate their mastery. Students then select a media tool that fits their style and the learning objective to show me what they know. Now let's explore what my students did with their newfound authority when I provided not much more than a menu of options that could showcase their mastery of biology. Here, Amanda created a whiteboard-style video tutorial to showcase the form and function of a phospholipid bilayer.
Today, we will be learning about the phospholipid bilayer. First off, we have the phosphate itself. It consists of two parts, the phosphate head, which is hydrophilic, meaning it loves water, and the fatty acid tail, which is hydrophobic, meaning it hates water. These two parts combine perfectly to form the phospholipid.
Next is a short portion of the story Emma wrote for this children's story to explain the role of opposing muscles in movement.
Biceps and triceps were siblings that could never agree. When one did or said something, the other did or said the exact opposite. The only way that they would cooperate was if the task involved their shared aspiration in life: movement.
In this podcast, Clarice applied enzyme immobilization to the food industry.
Good evening, Bioneers, and welcome back to the BioLab, your favorite podcast for all things HL Bio. Today, we'll be learning about everyone's least favorite disaccharide, lactose, and how the food industry has created an empire out of lactose-free products.
Bringing some music into her work, Jackie wrote, sang, and danced a rap to explain the differences between DNA and RNA.
That really freaking six, yeah. DNA has a double helix, which means it's double-stranded and really low-key twisted. Also, not to mention, it has four main freaking bases: adenine and thymine, guanine and cytosine. Those pair together, and yet RNA doesn't have no thymine.
Highlighting the IB learner trait of being a risk taker, Sophie pursued an additional challenge by creating this video in Espanol to highlight the role of the SA node in heart contractions.
Ok, para recordar, nodos son grupos de miocitos cardíacos que depolizan y repolizan solos, con no ayuda. Aquí es un dibujo muy terrible y básico del corazón, y aquí en el atrio derecho.
In this final example, Abigail animated and recorded this video tutorial to explain semi-conservative DNA replication.
If you are a biology student, an essential question which you may have about genetic processes is, how does DNA replicate? Have you ever wondered how DNA replicates to form a new molecule identical to the original, and which enzymes are used to do this?
So did it work? Again, let's go back to the students to find out what they thought. 81% of my students agree or strongly agree that in my class they learn to use technology well to support their learning. Additionally, 90% of my students agree or strongly agree that they can show evidence of their learning in a variety of ways. Reflecting on my work, first I found that fewer artifacts is better than more. In my first few iterations, the number of artifacts my students made was overwhelming and fatigued their creativity. Second, later iterations worked much better when student exemplars could be used to inspire my creators. Third, with permission, keep showing off the great work that gets submitted. Fourth, this teaching technique works best when students can improve and hone their creativity with multiple iterations of the project over the school year. Finally, be sure that all options will equally allow students to shine. If some options don't seem to work, cut them. The IB is well set up for this project due to having many very specific learning objectives in their curriculum, rather than the general statements in Massachusetts frameworks, next generation science standards, or the Common Core. Thus, in other curriculums, teachers could build options for student choice by compiling their daily SWABOT classroom objectives into one list. More support may be needed for students with significant learning differences or English learners. Many of my students with learning differences and former English learners have performed very well with this project, but I have not had students that are significantly below grade level, nor have I had any students that were current English learners. To push my thinking, I want to consider how I could use the best creations to help or hook our 9th grade biology students. Additionally, I want to consider how I could simplify this project to allow students to present improvements in their understanding after identifying weaknesses during a post-test reflection. In summary, I utilized the democratic science teaching pedagogy idea of shared authority in learning environments. I believe I successfully motivated many of my students to take control and become proud creators of STEM content.